I think that it's can be difficult being a woman of color in this country. I'm not going to say it's the worst thing ever, but I will say that there are a lot of microaggressions and things that sometimes we can't say verbally that we feel.
Yeah.
And knowing that I'm in a space where usually it's just me. I mean, political spaces, just me. Sports, just me. Not all the time, but knowing that it makes me feel powerful in a sense, and kind of just powerful and happy to know that I'm paving some type of way for the people that come next. But yeah.
Yeah, trailblazing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to Experts Lounge, your gateway to the captivating world of entrepreneurs. Here, passion seamlessly blends with profit and creativity dances with business acumen. I'm your host, Jonathan Tees, and I am ready to guide you through intimate conversations with today's trailblazing entrepreneurs.
All right, so today's guest, her work truly inspires me. You may have seen her in the New York Times. You may have seen her in Times Magazine, and I'm just impressed when I look up and recognize the person who took an iconic photo. If you ever look at newspapers and see these images that get syndicated across just all of these publications, somebody's behind the lens of that. And when you think about being behind the lens, you're also thinking about the visual aspect of storytelling. And that's what I want to get into today. My guest has been formally trained from Western Kentucky University and has been seen in a number of publications. Alyssa Pointer.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Thank you for being here.
I'm excited.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to start from the very beginning.
Okay.
And ask about just your roots. Where are you from, and how did you get into photography?
All right, great question. I'm gonna try to make this a short answer. I grew up on the south side of Atlanta, so I grew up in Jonesboro. I went to high school at Sandy Creek High School, which is in Tyrone, Georgia. While I was there, I was taking a digital art class. Wasn't great at Photoshop, but I was like, I need this to get through. And a substitute teacher put in a VHS tape of National Geographic, and I was like, whoa. This is it. I'm gonna be in the mountains. I'm gonna be in the snow, covering animals, covering war. And after I saw that, I learned what photojournalism was. I did a bunch of Googling, found out that there was a school in Kentucky that had it as a major. Made sure when I got there and went through orientation that I could pay in-state tuition, because my dad was like, I'm not paying out-of-state tuition. So after we checked that box, I went to school in Kentucky, and I studied photojournalism and African American studies, and it kind of just went from there.
What is it about taking a picture that you love?
For me, I really was a history nerd in high school. I still, to this day, love history. And so I love the idea of being able to capture a moment in time that really allows the viewer and the audience to think about what it is they're seeing and infer from the information that I'm able to capture in the image. They're either their idea, but then also looking at the facts that I provide to them in the caption. I like being able to show people worlds that they've never been in to kind of help question, their reality.
Mm-hmm. What has been some of the impact of the work that you've done?
I think that for me specifically, like I said, I'm from Georgia, but my parents were transplants, and so I kind of am a first generation Southerner in a sense, and so I'm really happy when I'm able to allow people to see what the South looks like, the good and the bad, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing the Black women, people of color kind of rising up through issues that they may be facing, and also seeing kind of the bad parts, or the parts that are kind of ingrained, the traditions of the South, whether that be racism, whether that be, sexism, all the things. But also just painting a true picture. Mm-hmm. And so I think my photos have been able to, like I said, show people the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it is like to live in the South. Yeah,
I think people underestimate the power of media. And so something that you just touched on is the transparency. And oftentimes, we often romanticize places. I remember before I moved to Atlanta and went to school here, having this idea and this concept, and just having, in essence, a culture shock. to learn the diversity within the community here within the city,
Yeah.
on top of, it being a microcosm of diversity across the entire globe.
Yeah.
So seeing your photos and the way that they document all aspects of life, especially in the South, but both the pros and the cons. What do you find about being objective in journalism? Why is that important?
I think it's important, real quickly, to define to me what you mean by being objective, so I make sure I understand I'm answering correctly.
That's a good. See, the fact that you know to ask that question.
Just want to.
Yeah, but that's a level of analysis that most people, especially in the days of social media, don't take the time to ask, to look at the question beneath the question, or in your case, the photo behind the why behind the photo, right?
Right.
So showing, in this case, your work shows the, I don't want to say dichotomy, but like you said, it shows the good. There's the beautiful aspects of being in Atlanta, the city, but then there's also, like you said, some of the challenging as well. So why is it important to show both sides of that coin?
Thank you for that. I'm going to make sure I answer the question correctly, like you said. So I think it's important because not everyone has the same lived experience. And even, I'm only 30 years old, but I've had so many lived experiences just in my industry, growing up in the South, growing up in the county, the city I grew up in. And so I think it's important to kind of just force people to see what is happening around them, because you grow up in a bubble and you may not be aware of what other people are going through, whether that be good, bad, or ugly. Like if you grow up kind of in a place where you're not financially stable, you don't know about other ways to gain money, to gain assets, to become wealthy, right? And so my job is to just show everyone what life is like. And I kind of love that because there are things that I may not ever get to see, but because I work in journalism, people afford me that window into their lives. And I just love that, so yeah.
I love that. And something that I don't want to let slide by is you highlighted how much you've accomplished in really such a short amount of time. So walk people through, first of all, some of your favorite accomplishments, because Times Magazine, like that's a big deal. How do we get there?
Whew. How do we get there? Honestly, a lot of hard work, a little bit of luck. I do believe in that. And then just being really focused on digging into my craft and making sure I'm the best version of myself. Yes, my work has been featured in Time's 100 Photos of the Year 3 times in a row, which is to me mind-boggling because sometimes you got to sit back and be like, wow, I did that,
Yes.
Sometimes you get so inundated with the workflow, you're like, dang. So I've done that. I was able to be recognized when I was in school by the Hearst Journalism Awards when I did a story about a young boxer in Louisville, Kentucky, who was kind of dealing with a bunch of post-trauma from his life. And he was still able to work with his uncle to kind of box his way out of all those hardships. So being able to do that is awesome. And then just being recognized for other small projects that I did when I worked at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the paper in Atlanta here. It was been pretty good too. So it feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is, just thinking from a solely career perspective, there's something to be said about having projects that you can point to and also working with names that other people recognize. It's a large part of why I took some time away from Atlanta to build, my journey was to attempt to build that clientele for myself. Another thing that you mentioned in this story was having a boxer who was having mental issues. So at Love, we're actually huge advocates for mental health. And so as a creative, I'd like to ask you that question. What are some things that you find that are challenging, not like on a stressful level, in your profession, and how do you deal with it?
So as a photojournalist, I'm usually thrusted into places that I may not want to be in, right? Because people are maybe dealing with trauma, or maybe it's a environment where they may not want an outsider to be in it because, not that bad things are happening, but it's like I'm getting a view, like I said, into a world that most people don't get to. So I deal with a lot of anxious people Like when I get into a space, they're like, who are you? What are you doing? Or if I'm in a space where breaking news happens and I have to show up at an event where a lot of traumatic things are happening, I deal with a lot of kind of calming people down in a sense, in a very short period of time, getting them to trust me, which is very hard, but it's something you have to work on doing. But there are also times where people are just angry at me for being there, and I sometimes can get frustrated in those moments or anxious myself. And in those moments, I kind of just step back. I take a deep breath. I decide if I want to continue trying to get this image or if I want to just take care of myself in that moment and walk away, which is sometimes hard to do as a journalist because you're taught to always get the image. But I think we're in a time now where our editors or our bosses or the people we're working with will understand, you know, if you felt like you did your best and you want to walk away, I respect that, which I think is great, especially as a woman of color.
Absolutely. Man, there's so much there. I think about just the idea that when there's something going on, most people run away from the scene, and there are certain people that have to run to it. Right. And you run into the fire.
I do.
Yeah. So how do you counterbalance that? How do you come down from that when you're not having to rush into the fire?
Working on passion projects is a way that I'm able to kind of get away from high breaking news, things like that can be very stressful. And so working on passion projects, but also just going to therapy, you know, having someone that I can confide in, talk to, that is like, hey, you're doing great, or you do need to take some time off. It's very helpful to have that balance for me.
Yeah, no, therapy is a tool that we completely advocate for. Actually have had campaigns and support mental health advocacy, so I completely feel you on that.
Yeah.
Shifting gears, let's get into passion projects.
All right.
You mentioned the wealth disparity and covering a project that highlights inequality. I'd love to hear more.
So I started a project covering a mom and her son who are dealing with income inequality. And so a lot about journalism is finding a fact and then telling a visual story for me about that fact. And Atlanta has the highest income inequality rate in the United States. It's been number one for a very long time. They also have a very high racial wealth gap, which means in addition to poor people not ever being able to reach the wealth that the wealthiest have in Atlanta, Black people are disproportionately struggling, right? While people of different races in the city of Atlanta, I need to make sure I talk about that city proper and not necessarily Metro Atlanta, are struggling. And so I was able to work with a nonprofit that was giving mothers universal basic income for a year. So it was $500, no strings attached, giving them money every month. And I found a mother who was receiving the money. And while she was getting the money, she was able to kind of dream bigger than what she had in front of her. And so I went with her as she went to go look for a house, right? Unfortunately, she wasn't approved for the loan because of the income that she made, but she still was able to dream bigger than what she was living in now. And so for me, like I said, this has been a problem for years, but no one has really dived into what that looks like, right? This is a young mother who went to college. She just finished her master's degree. She's struggling, but she's also trying her best to make a way for herself. And to me, that's beautiful because people assume that, you know, people are just getting this money because they don't want to work. Like, no, this lady, like I said, just finished her master's, has a son. She has a support system of family, but because financially, you know, we're not necessarily able to make as much, specifically because she's a teacher, it's like, how then is she able to get higher, you know, get out of this spot that she's in?
Wait a minute, so she's a teacher. She's
yes,
you know, respected profession
yes.
in this country.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Right. It is wild. And it's just so interesting to see all the different ways she's having to adjust her money to make ends meet. And she's not necessarily struggling, but she's not better off. You know, she has these dreams and aspirations, but unfortunately is not able to reach them, specifically maybe because of this profession. So
yeah. Like a classic glass ceiling situation.
Yeah. But I believe in her, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's what's so fucking awesome about this young woman.
Yeah.
She's a year younger than me, but she's just hustling, you know. She's like, I'm not gonna let these things stop me. And I want people to see that heart.
So let's talk about the technicality, like the technical aspects of sharing that story, right? First, how do you even get the opportunity to tell that story?
Right. So I've been contacting this nonprofit for years, right? They had the idea of doing this universal basic income program, but they never had the funds. And eventually they were able to get the funds. And so once they did, since I had been in contact with them, I was like, listen, I'd love to jump on this. You create that conversation or like letting them know, like, I'm interested in doing this because X, Y, Z, right? And I spoke with them about, you know, kind of collaboration, which I think is really important in all aspects of daily life, but also work. So I'm like, what if you need something, let me know, because you've given me the access to do this, you know, and it's all about creating relationships and letting people know up front what it is you want to do and being honest and keeping them informed, I think is also important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you find a group that's willing to support you telling this story, right? What does it look like then to follow a person, a working professional, and then document something as sensitive as her financial struggle?
Right. So it's about, as I said, building that relationship, kind of being annoying, calling her, you know, texting her every week, like, hey, what's going on? You know, it is odd to have someone want to be a part of your life. But I think explaining to her what it is I want to do, reassuring, you know, reinforcing, showing examples of like, this would be the end product, right? And then we had that conversation up front, you know, this is what I want to do. I'm doing it for free. Like right now, I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm using my own gas. I'm going out. I'm calling her. And the hope is to get grants, right? To talk to people and say, I'm working on this project. Can you sponsor me? Can you give me some money to continue working on it? But it's all about building relationships, which I think is important anywhere you go. It says, and it could be as simple as just building a relationship with your boss. You know, it's not like you're not best friends in that situation, but it is like talking about what you need. And talking about how you can work together and collaborate to make that happen.
Yeah. So I know that you don't work for the newspaper anymore, yet you still get calls to go places. So how do you, and you mentioned you're doing this project not for pay.
Right.
So how do you support yourself so that way you are able to tell those stories?
Right. So I do take on a lot of editorial clients. I work with the New York Times, as mentioned, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, NPR, honestly, whoever calls me, like I will do the work for them. And that helps in addition to doing event photography in Atlanta. I'm lucky enough to be a Black woman that lives in a city that is very Black. And so people will call me and say, listen, I know you do event work, you know, what can you charge? And I think it's very great. It's been helpful to have worked with people who don't live here to learn about market pricing so that I'm not selling myself short, but at the same time trying to work with the market that I'm in, which can be hard for creatives because if you don't know about specifically visuals, licensing, usage, if you just get paid for a day rate and you let the person use your images however they want to, you're truly wasting out on money.
Well, let's talk about some of those opportunities, right? So what you're referring to is basically, like you said, a day rate or like a work for hire kind of situation. But what are beyond that? And that is essentially you set your price. A person, if they can afford it, will pay you your price, an invoice per se.
Yeah.
But then beyond getting paid for that, what are some other income streams that are in this event photography or photojournalism field that people may not be aware of?
So there's a lot of work in commercial, like nonprofits, for instance. They can be local nonprofits, but they can also be national. I've worked for a lot of national nonprofits that have small groups in Atlanta that need photography. So I'll cover huge conferences. I'll cover smaller events that are just showing off what they do in the community. And then also bigger commercial clients, which I don't get often, but when I do, they're very great for me. I don't want to say lucrative, but I'm able to make more. But also knowing that photojournalism, because I'm not just, let's say, a studio photographer, I'm able to capture moments, capture emotions while I'm moving around every space that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I think being able to learn how to do that has made me more accessible, more people to work with me, because they know I'm not just going to be like one thing.
What's the difference between a studio photographer and a one that's able to capture that emotion or that story?
So studio photographers are awesome because they can mold light, which is a great skill to have. And they can do it in a way that, for me, they call us like the one-man shop. Like I'm a run and gun person. If you want me to do this, I know how to do a lot of everything, but I can't say I'm an expert at a specific type of photography, but I can do it all because I have to. But I would say that's the difference. Studio work is in one place. And what I do, I can do it anywhere.
Absolutely. So I think that's something that is important, especially about understanding your market. You mentioned being like a one-man shop versus being, you know, this idea of like a boutique or an agency or something like that. And in my experience on the marketing side, I'm not sure if you experienced this as a photojournalist, but you know, in one market, someone could really want a one-man do-it-all shop because to them it sounds like, oh, that's my individual solution. Whereas in another market, it's like, oh, you're just a little small, you know, fry. I need a big fish, per se. So then they look for an agency. So have you faced that? And if so, like, how do you overcome it?
I would consider myself in the middle of those two markets. I have worked with agencies and I have worked just by myself, run and gun it. I think that with agencies, you have a better opportunity to get paid more and get the license and usage that we were talking about earlier, because people are like, this is a reputable source, I'm willing to pay you $10,000 one day in addition to $2,500 per image, right? Which is something you don't think about getting if you're just by yourself.
Right. You're focused on that work for hire part.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying I'm in the middle, because now that I know about usage and license, I'm trying to be like, listen, I know what I'm worth and I know what you're supposed to pay me, right? But where can we find the middle of, you know, paying me what I think I can work with, even if I don't have an agent. But I've done both, and I prefer, I don't know if I prefer, I could do both.
Yeah.
And I enjoy both.
Well, something I kind of don't want to gloss over is a skill that I heard you allude to a little bit, which is negotiation. I think that it can be scary for people, especially in a creative space where you're not constantly thinking about the business aspect. So as somebody who has essentially cut the cord from your newspaper gig and do a lot of work for yourself, how do you handle the money talk and how do you manage pushback and all those things that come? And I will frame it by saying, especially as a Black woman.
Yes, so it's hard. It's hard, but I'm lucky to know people, like I said, in both spheres, right? I'm lucky to know people who have agents that I literally can call, which happened recently. And I was like, listen, someone reached out, they wanted this commercial gig, how much should I charge? They asked questions I didn't even know to ask. And now that I have that information, I'm able to feel better when I go back to the producer who's saying, you know, what's your rate?
Yep.
And I'm part of organizations that give me the opportunity to talk to producers at agencies and say, listen, someone reached out to me about X, Y, and Z. What should I charge them? And that's a luxury, okay?
Yeah. So, in essence, community.
Yes.
So, you sit on the board for the National Association, make sure I get it right, the National Association for Black Journalists?
Visual Task Force,
Visual Task Force specifically.
Yes.
Yes. Let's first talk about the organization and the power of that organization, and then how you're getting involved.
Sure. So NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists, was created a long time ago. The Visual Task Force is specifically for people who do visual storytelling, not just photo, it's photo, video, graphic arts, anything that is a visual story form. And so we try to cultivate a space for specifically younger folks who are still kind of in college or kind of working through the first kind of couple years of you know, being a professional, and give them opportunities to grow, whether that be learning about video, like giving them a space where they can get critiqued on their work, in addition to offering scholarships. It's a great space to be in. We do an auction every year during the national convention where we auction off some really beautiful historic prints from different newspapers to raise money for the scholarships.
Yeah. That's amazing. So something that I learned, a shortcut to my success as a corporate marketer, was understanding the power of associations. So for any profession, any profession, just seriously Google it, any profession, high probability that there is an association aligned with that. And if you want to shortcut your learning curve to learn a skill, to break into an industry, perhaps the best way to find the learning opportunities as well as the job opportunities is to get involved with an association. So how has being surrounded with people in that community aspect impacted your career directly?
having the connections and building those relationships has allowed people to reach out to folks in different cities and say, I need someone in Atlanta, I need a photographer in Atlanta, and I'll get a call, you know, and that's been very helpful for me. Being able to give back or just kind of talk to the younger generation that's coming into photojournalism or just photography in general has been helpful to kind of, you know, allow them to see what pitfalls I may have made, you know, and learn from them instead of them having to make the mistakes themselves. But it also just fostered a community because there are not a lot of Black female photojournalists working professionally. One of my mentors coined the term unicorn, that like when you see us, you're lucky because you don't see us often, specifically professional ones. And so I think it's really important to be able to cultivate that community. So it's been very helpful.
What do you think about that idea of being a unicorn, and how do you feel about it?
I take it with a sense of pride. I think that can be difficult being a woman of color in this country. I'm not going to say it's the worst thing ever, but I will say that there are a lot of microaggressions and things that sometimes we can't say verbally that we feel.
Yeah.
And knowing that I'm in a space where usually it's just me. I mean, political spaces, just me. Sports, just me. Not all the time, but knowing that it makes me feel powerful in a sense, and kind of just powerful and happy to know that I'm paving some type of way for the people that come next. But yeah.
Yeah, trailblazing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really impressive, like you said, just to think about the impact of all these places that you show up, and the way that just by you simply being there breaks a barrier, offers exposure, not just for you, but also for the other people to get an understanding that you are incredible, and they can see that and start to think of you and us in that same way.
Agreed.
So that's really awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so away from work, because it's not all you do.
Right.
Right. When you're not snapping photos, what are some of the other ways that you fill your time?
I like to be outside in nature. I like to enjoy, I like shopping. I have...
Let's talk about what I have been so privy to all of these estate sales, thrift stores. Like, tell me about this, I'm going to say obsession.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's talk about it.
It's an obsession.
Let's go.
Yes, I love an estate sale. I grew up going to thrift stores a lot, and so I like the idea of finding knickknacks, finding old antiques that you can't find everywhere else. And so, as I work for myself, and so estate sales here in the South start on a Wednesday, and you can find me in a line on a Wednesday morning. I may get there 30, 40 minutes before, and there's already a line. Sometimes I go for things that I really want, and sometimes I'm just there to kind of be nosy and see what houses look like. But it's a good, fun journey. Usually I'm the youngest person there, and I'm always talking to the old heads like, hey, what you here for? And it's fun to kind of just be in that little tribe, that community of people that also like to, kind of buy and or sell antiques and use furniture and things like that.
So I think there's actually a hidden kind of benefit there, thinking about the fact that you work for yourself, you're often having these financial conversations. So it's like a very easy way to get comfortable with negotiating your price or the price of a thing, because if you can do it at an estate sale, you can do it over a contract, right?
This is true.
Add a couple things in that basket.
Just throw it all in there and say, let me get this for $5. It'll be fine.
Go for it. So it's very interesting, and that's something that I've kind of noticed just as I've gotten to know you more as a person, is just kind of see the way that you approach the world. It's a very entrepreneurial approach.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, if you ask me where I got that from...
Yeah, where did you get that from?
Listening to T.I. growing up.
Let's talk about
My husband introduced me to Jay-Z, so it's all about that. I mean, my favorite movie is American Gangster with Frank Lucas. I don't know why, but that movie is just...
American Gangster is actually my favorite Jay-Z album. And what I love is the parallel between Jay-Z's personal story and Frank Lucas's story, and the way that album tells both stories simultaneously.
Yes.
I think that's the power that media and music and art can have and illustrate a parallel that other people may not have necessarily connected a dot.
Yeah.
So
It's awesome.
I love it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Not just I love it too.
Yeah, it's just something about, I think, like I said, listening to all those artists, but also like what I experienced growing up. I was really exposed to a lot of different things. A lot of different friends had different financial statuses, class statuses, and just being able to be around all of that, I think, really opened my mind to like there are options that are not just what I grew up in, which has been very helpful to me.
Absolutely. Like early in the conversation, we talked about travel and the importance. I also traveled a lot growing up, and being able to see that the world is bigger than your neighborhood or your city or wherever, you know, your block, you know what I mean, is super impactful. So now that you've found this profession, you've gone all in, and have, you know, already achieved so much. If you could look back at yourself when you first started the race, what could you tell your younger self that would help you get here faster, easier, less stress?
I'll go to the less stressed approach, path, and journey. I would just say slow down. I would tell myself to take it one day at a time, to really cultivate and really dig into the people around you as far as relationships and communication is concerned, and not think, you know, be so involved in making sure it's the best thing ever, right? Being okay with showing up, and, you know, with things not perfect, but also giving myself the ability to speak up when I'm around people that seem intimidating to me, because I do have the ability to be a force, and just kind of telling myself that, because I didn't know that younger. You know, you're kind of taught as a Southerner to be quiet, especially as a woman, you know, sit in your space, don't fight back, X, Y, Z. And now it's like, nah, you know what you're talking about. They're gonna try to, you know, tell you that you're wrong or kind of bullshit you, but that's not true. And just stick to your guns, and maybe someone will see it, maybe they won't. But as long as you know that you're doing the right thing, that's all that matters.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. That confidence to be able to just step out there and like just do it or speak up, especially in the presence of other people. I think that's an aspect of an interdynamic that doesn't get talked about a lot, like a power dynamic.
Yeah.
The only time I will say that I've ever been starstruck was sitting in a room with Jay-Z. Happened to walk down Peachtree to getting sushi, Bluefin, I don't think it's still here.
Heard of that.
Bluefin.
Yeah.
And he and Beyonce just happened to be there, and I happened to stroll in there, and I like sucked the air out the room. So I had that very vivid experience. It was so big that I could recognize that feeling, and when I felt it, I recognized what it was, and then try to push past that.
It's hard to do if you're in the presence of Jay-Z and Beyonce.
I mean, I didn't do it then.
I'd be like, ugh.
I didn't do it then. But to look back and understand, right? I mean, and think about just me being young, creative entrepreneur at that time. I mean, of course, there's not much he can do for me, or I can do for him at that point.
Right.
But to just understand that power dynamic early in the career is huge.
Yeah.
But I find comfort in that, knowing that they bleed just like I bleed. That's what I tell myself. And it's like, okay, well, then I can speak just like they can speak, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important to kind of hype yourself up to the confidence. Yeah, I think it's important to maybe envision yourself as someone else. Like, what would this person do in this situation? And that has been helpful to me. I'm not going to exactly say what and whom I envision myself as, but it ain't this.
Okay, I was gonna go there, but I do that too. So I'm a firm believer in archetypes.
Okay.
Like, again, Jay-Z for me is very early on an influence for me, because what I saw from him was somebody who was very creative, but also manage his business in a way that I didn't see most creatives managing their business. Yeah. So for me, that was an archetype. I didn't recognize that was marketing. I didn't recognize that entrepreneurship was a good pathway to get there. I kind of learned that along the way. But if it wasn't for like that North Star, that guiding star situation, that was very helpful for me to kind of like just move in that direction.
I see. I'm trying to think. Honestly, because we are kind of related through familial. You're about to come into the family like I did. So my husband, I believe you influenced his Jay-Z love. And so that influence then got up on me. And so listening to, the lyrics and really as an adult, right, after dealing with issues at the job that I had, being like, yeah, I can make my own thing. I remember Jay-Z did a feature on Meek Mill's song. I don't remember the name of the song, but he has this one line where he's like, I cannot remember. I wish I could quote it and be that fire, but it's something about, go back to your boss with a toupee. Like, I'm living over here doing, and I was just like, that's it? Like I need to just step out.
Yeah.
I need to be in charge of my narrative, which is hard to do if you've, never seen anyone do it. You've got family that's like, I don't know, that's not really pushing you, but I'm lucky to have a husband who kind of had a head start financially and has been able to kind of be like, you can't do this. Be that person and be like, this is how you do it, or look into it, and been very helpful in that journey. But I really think you need someone to help, whether that be a mentor or just a friend that can point you into the direction of someone. But yeah, Jay-Z definitely, that line, I was like, you're right. Fuck him.
Yeah, that man, yes.
Fuck him.
But at the same time, I also just want to advocate that it is, no, fuck him.
I mean, yes, there's that balance. But at the end of the day, you just gotta, if you feel strongly, try it out.
Yeah.
You can always go back to a job.
That actually was the mindset, right? Like putting a plan in place for myself to take that leap. I put a plan in place. I did save money.
Yeah. So
I had a financial reserve. I knew my baseline number, and I gave myself 6 months of that to cover rent, and bills, and stuff like that. And I told myself that if I couldn't make something happen in that time frame, then I could just go back to my previous job.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least try.
Right.
Or and something else will come eventually.
Right.
And it's that taking that step and having faith that something is going to come after that.
I agree. But for me, it was that. I made a plan. I saved, on the way out, I was like, let me start taking more money not taking money out of my 401k, but not putting it there. I was saving as I was at the job, but it was doing that, saving money so that I could have money to buy equipment. I bought equipment while I was still there. I made a lot of decisions before I left, and I think that's important to plan. You can't just jump.
Well, you can.
You shouldn't.
You should.
You should not just jump. You should have a plan in place because things happen. And that money, that savings will go very quickly.
So fast.
Specifically when you work for yourself. For me, there's a lot of net 30, which I don't know if everyone knows that about. That's when you get paid 30 days after you work. It's not every 2 weeks. So you have to make sure you have money in the bank to cover the bills that month so that eventually you do get paid the next month, and it all works out. Yeah, so it's hard, but it's great.
Okay. So similarly, you were talking about being intentional about like how you direct your funds.
Yeah.
Saving so that way you could purchase equipment, purchasing equipment before you left the job. So I think the money part is a part that we don't get taught in school.
Right.
And it's a part that we kind of just have to learn the hard way and get our fingers right, cross our fingers that we get it right. So what are the tools or the practices that you try to do for yourself to make sure that you can sustain yourself and support your family and the household?
So I definitely have purchased I use QuickBooks to focus on how I'm making my money. Sometimes I get send invoices through QuickBooks. That has helped me focus on how much I need to pay during the quarter. I am still, I'm gonna be honest, still working to get a CPA, someone that can help me, an accountant, with my money, specifically just paying taxes at the end of the year. But I'm very aware of how much I pay myself. I give myself a certain amount of money each month, in addition to paying bills, and so I focus on how to spend. Opened a business banking account, separated my Social Security, created a bank or EIN. I got an EIN number so that I could separate my finances, created an LLC. I did all those things, and I learned that while I was in college. And so I was able to be like, okay, this is what I need to do. But I know people still struggle. Like I had someone ask me about a business credit card. I was like, oh, if you have a business account through Wells Fargo, you can get a credit card. But people don't know that. And so I set myself up that way. I try to look at how much I make each month. round it up, see what I make so I know where I'm at going forward. And then having a savings has been hard. I'm trying. And then I created the 401k, the Roth, which allows me to save a certain amount per year, which I'm struggling to do, but you should do it if you can. But all of those things, and like I said, I learned that through my husband. He's very good with finances. Without him, like, I didn't grow up with the best financial background. And so without him being like, this is what you need to do, I don't think I'd be in the place that I am now.
So proud.
Okay.
Super proud.
It's very helpful.
Honestly, that's the support, man. I wish that, and I'm very much appreciative of the work that you're doing, highlighting things like wealth disparity. A large part of that is caused by lack of information.
Right.
And that if people understood the way that money works, then maybe that could be less of an impact. So I'm very happy that we had a chance to talk about that in depth from both your operation side as well as some of the realities that are out there that good paying professions and people not really slacking can still struggle.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
It is.
So what projects are you working on currently and where can we find them?
Well, like I said, I'm working on that income inequality project. I have not published anything yet. I'm waiting to gather more footage, but that will be, I believe, I'm going to publish it first by myself on my site and then hope to have a gallery opening so that people in the community can learn about this young lady and her son that I'm photographing, because I really want the community here to learn about him before maybe asking for a national audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so find me on Instagram. My bad. You can find me on Instagram at Alyssa Pointer Photo. You can find me online just at alyssapointerphoto.com. And I also have a commercial website, which is Leola Studios, named after my grandmother, where I do kind of family pictures. I do commercial work for nonprofits, and then I do work for like Fortune 500 companies and stuff like that.
I love it. Honestly, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been awesome just kind of getting an opportunity to tell that story, to tell your story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Jonathan. It's so great that people are being able to see in the minds and lives of creatives. That's hard. We don't normally talk about ourselves much, so it's good to have a platform to do so.
Thank you, man. It's important for me to be able to highlight the stories of people like you, especially people that are typically behind the camera. I know I get comfortable being behind the camera or behind the computer running the campaigns. So, this is also a step for me to be able to also use my creative power to highlight more creative people. It's a pay it forward kind of thing.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So, it's a pleasure having you here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it. We're at time. So make sure you check out Alyssa, check out her work, support the local community, support local art, and most importantly, support local journalism. Do your own research, fact checks. But that's a completely different conversation. So until the next time I see you, I wish you peace and love, and always seek expertise.